I stood in the garage of the house my wife and I bought the year our son was born, the house where I'd taught him to change a tire on a Saturday morning, the house whose deed I had quietly transferred into his name 14 months ago. And I listened to my daughter-in-law tell me I was a burden. Walter, we've been more than patient. She was leaning against the kitchen doorframe, arms crossed, voice flat. But you're here all day. You eat our food, you use the heat, and you don't contribute a single dollar. That has to change. My son was at the kitchen table. He was looking at his coffee. What kind of contribution did you have in mind? I asked. She had clearly rehearsed this part. $800 a month toward utilities and groceries. That's fair. That's below what a room in this area actually costs. $800. In the house I had paid off. In the house where my wife had planted the rose bushes still growing along the fence. In the house I had signed over because my son told me he and his wife were drowning, that they couldn't keep up with the mortgage, that they were going to lose it. I'll need a little time to arrange things, I said. My daughter-in-law nodded. She was already satisfied, already turning back toward whatever was next on her list. End of the month, Walter. That gives you 3 weeks. My son finally looked up. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked back at his coffee. I went upstairs to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed my wife and I had shared for 31 years before she got sick, and I thought about what she used to say when someone misjudged her. She'd smile not at them, just to herself, and say, "Let them think what they want. The truth keeps its own schedule." The truth had been keeping its schedule for a long time. I called Ray the next morning. He picked up on the second ring. "Morning, boss. Everything all right? I need to know if the apartment above the workshop is still available." There was a pause. "The one we finished last spring? Yeah, it's sitting empty. But sir, I thought you wanted to be close to Ethan. And plans change," I said. "I'll need it by the end of the month." "I'll have Louise air it out today," he said. "You want me to stock it?" "Just the basics. I'll handle the rest." I spent the next few days quietly sorting through what I owned in the house. It wasn't much. Not anymore. After Maggie died, I'd stopped accumulating things. A few boxes of books, her photographs, which I wasn't leaving behind. Some tools. The wooden jewelry box I'd made for her by hand when we were still young, and I still thought handmade meant more than bought. She'd kept it on her dresser for 40 years, and she was right that it did. My daughter-in-law walked past my open door on the third evening and glanced in at the boxes. She didn't say anything. She kept walking. My son knocked on the door frame the following night. "Dad." He sat down on the chair in the corner, the one where I used to read when Maggie was alive. Brenda said maybe 800 was too much. She said 600 would be fine. Just something to help cover things. I looked at him for a moment. My son was 41 years old. He had his mother's eyes and his grandfather's build, and somewhere along the way he had stopped being the boy who used to follow me around the workshop asking questions about everything. "It's not about the amount," I said. "Then what's it about?" "I'll be out by the end of the month," I said, like she asked. His face shifted. "Where are you going to go?" "Dad, your pension isn't... You can't afford a place on your own, not with everything." "I've managed harder things," I said. He left without saying anything else. On the last Saturday of the month, Ray pulled up in the company truck. It was a white Ford, nothing remarkable, the kind of truck you'd see on any job site in any county in the state. My daughter-in-law was drinking tea at the kitchen window when he rang the bell. She opened the door and looked him over. "He's upstairs," she said. "Thank you, ma'am." Ray helped me carry the boxes down. It took 3 trips. My son stood in the driveway for the last one, hands in his jacket pockets. He watched Ray load the tailgate without speaking. "This is it?" he finally said. "You're just leaving?" "You asked me to contribute or find somewhere else," I said. "I'm finding somewhere else." "But where?" "Dad, seriously, where are you going?" "Somewhere I can afford," I said. My daughter-in-law appeared in the doorway. "Well, safe travels, Walter. And listen, if you left anything in the basement, just so you know, we're converting that space. Whatever's down there is probably going to get cleared out." The basement where I'd built the shelving unit she stored her yoga equipment on. The basement where I'd spent 3 weekends refinishing the dining table she'd asked me to fix when they first moved in, because they couldn't afford a new one. The basement where there was still a workbench with my initials carved into the leg, because my father had taught me to mark your work. There's nothing down there I need, I said. Ray held the passenger door. I got in. Through the window I could see my son still standing in the driveway. He raised one hand slowly. I nodded back. We drove south out of the suburb, past the shopping centers and the chain restaurants, onto the state highway that opened up into 2 lanes and then into farmland. Ray didn't ask questions. He was good at that. He'd been good at that for 17 years. We turned off the highway after 40 minutes, onto a county road I knew by memory. Old oaks lined both sides, past the curve, past the historical marker for the original township, and then through the iron gate that Ray had left open. The sign beside it read, Callaway Restoration and Design, Est, 2001, though that was only when we incorporated. The work had started long before that, in a rented space with 2 employees and a single contract for a law firm that wanted their lobby furniture returned to something respectable. The main building came into view, first a converted mill, 4 stories of original brick, the kind that doesn't get made anymore, with the new glass addition we'd built in 2018 running along the east side to let in the natural light the craftsmen needed. Then the storage and drying facility, then the climate-controlled archive room where pieces in active restoration lived between stages, then the smaller outbuildings where the finishing work happened. Beyond all of it, visible from the road if you knew where to look, the apartment above the old carriage house. Maggie had called it our someday house, the place she said we'd retire to when the main house felt like too much. We'd finished it the spring before she got her diagnosis. She never lived in it. I couldn't make myself live in it either, not after, so it had sat ready and unused for 4 years. Welcome home, Ray said. Louise had stocked the refrigerator and left a casserole on the counter with a note. Chicken and dumplings, the way you like it. The apartment was simple and warm. Maggie's photographs from the workshop's early years were already there. I'd sent them ahead on the windowsill above the kitchen sink. One of her standing in front of the mill building, the day we signed the lease, laughing at something I'd said. She was always laughing at something I said. I'm not sure what I expected the first week to feel like. Quieter, maybe. Lonelier. Instead, it felt like putting weight down after a long carry. I worked. That was what I knew how to do. I walked the workshop floor in the mornings, checking progress on active pieces. We had a carved mahogany sideboard from a Virginia estate, a set of Windsor chairs from a Connecticut museum, a 19th century secretary desk that a collector in Charleston had been waiting 18 months for. Because we don't rush. That was always the rule. You don't rush the work. My son called on a Wednesday. I let it go to voicemail. He called again Thursday and Friday, and the following Monday. On Tuesday I answered, Dad. He exhaled. Where are you? Are you all right? Are you eating? I'm fine. Can you just tell me where you are? Brenda and we've been worried. You can stop worrying, I said. I'm somewhere I can afford. That's not Dad. That's not helpful. I'm trying to... How are the renovations coming? I asked. Forget the renovations. Just tell me you're okay. I'm okay, I said. Call me when you want to have a real conversation. I hung up. I went back to work. My daughter-in-law called the week after. This surprised me. In 5 years of marriage to my son, she had called me directly exactly twice. Once when she needed to know if I remembered the name of the contractor who'd done the roof, and once to tell me Maggie's hospital had called the house by mistake. Walter. Hi. So, I know things got a little tense with the whole situation, and I want to apologize for how that conversation went. I could have been more sensitive. I appreciate that, I said. So, things are okay between us? Things are fine. Good. Because Ethan really misses having you around. And honestly, I was thinking you were always so handy, with furniture and things I'm looking at starting an interior design consulting business, and I could really use some seed money just to get started. Maybe 15 or 20,000. You must have some savings, and I'd pay you back. I was quiet for a moment. Brenda, I said, what do you think I did before I retired? Ethan said you did some kind of craft work. Woodworking, furniture repair. Something like that, I said. I'm going to have to decline the investment. I don't mix business with family. That's Walter. Family is supposed to support each other. I agree, I said. Completely. I hung up. The letter from the attorney came on a Thursday, certified mail. My son and daughter-in-law had retained counsel and were, the letter said, concerned about my well-being and cognitive state, given my recent decisions regarding my living situation. They were exploring options. I sat with the letter for a while. Then I called my own attorney. He'd been my attorney for 22 years. He had handled the incorporation, the contracts, the 3 acquisitions, the licensing agreements with the 4 museums we had ongoing relationships with, and the estate arrangements after Maggie passed. They're reaching, he said. There's no basis. You're not under any medical oversight. You haven't made any decisions that would indicate impaired judgment. I moved out of my son's house and declined to invest in my daughter-in-law's business, I said, both of which sound entirely rational, he said. You want me to respond? Not yet, I said. Give it a little more time. The following weekend, my son drove out. I was in the finishing room with a craftsman named Marcus, 26 years old, the most talented finisher I'd had in a decade, watching him apply the final coat to the secretary desk when Louise came and found me. Your son is here, she said quietly. He's in the parking area. Should I? Give me 10 minutes, I said. I finished watching Marcus work. There's something about a piece coming back to itself, the grain emerging, the color deepening that I never got tired of, no matter how many times I'd seen it. Maggie used to say I looked at restored furniture the way other men looked at sunsets. She wasn't wrong. I walked out to the lot. My son was standing beside his car looking at the main building. He'd driven past the sign. He knew what it said, but he was still looking at it like he was reading it for the first time, over and over. What is this? He said, not turning around. This is Callaway Restoration and Design, I said. Your mother's and mine. He turned. His face was doing something complicated. You own this. We built it, I said. Starting with a $300 table, we bought it in a estate sale and resold for $1,200 after I spent 2 weeks on it. That was $1,996. Your mother kept the books on a legal pad. You told me you did furniture repair. I did furniture repair. I also do museum conservation, estate restoration, private collection management, and institutional contracts in 7 states. Furniture repair was where it started. He looked at the building again, at the mill brick, at the glass addition, at the company trucks lined up along the side. How much is this worth? Does it matter? Dad. His voice had changed. You let me think you let us treat you like you had nothing. You let Brenda charge you rent. I didn't let Brenda do anything, I said. She made a choice. You let her. He flinched. Come inside, I said. I walked him through the finishing room, past the archive, through the main restoration floor. I showed him the secretary desk Marcus had finished that morning, back to something close to what it must have been the year it was made, with all its original hardware, and none of its original damage. I showed him the photographs along the east wall, Maggie and I at the mill signing, at the first museum contract, at the American Institute for Conservation Gala where we'd been recognized in 2019. He stopped at each one longer than the last. She looks happy, he said at one photo. Maggie at the Charleston Collector's Estate, holding a glass of sweet tea and laughing. She always loved the reveal, I said. The moment when the client sees a piece after restoration. She said it was like watching someone recognize an old friend. He was quiet for a while. We walked to the courtyard between the mill and the carriage house. The oaks were past their color, but still holding some of it, orange and rust against the gray sky. Why didn't you just tell us, he said. Would you like me to answer that honestly? Yes. Because your mother and I made a decision when you were young to keep the business separate from home. We didn't want you measuring your childhood by what we were building. We wanted you to have normal Saturday mornings, normal summers, a normal sense of what things cost and how to earn them. When you were small, that was the right call. When you got older, I kept waiting for you to ask, to be curious about what I did, where I went, why I sometimes came home with my hands smelling like linseed oil and lacquer. You never asked, Ethan, not once. He looked down at his shoes. When your mother got sick, I said, I thought maybe that would bring you closer to us, that you'd want to understand the life we'd built. But you were busy, which is fine. People are busy. And after she died, when you suggested I move in, I thought maybe now. Maybe being around each other day to day would open something up. I thought wrong. I didn't know how to be around you after Mom, he said. Everything about you reminded me of her. I know, I said. That's why I came. He sat down on the courtyard bench. He put his face in his hands for a moment, then looked up. Did you know about Brenda and the rent before it happened? Did you suspect? I suspected your marriage had some structural problems, I said. I didn't know how they'd express themselves. There are things I've found out recently about how she's been handling the finances, about some other things. He stopped. You don't have to tell me, I said. I think she married me because she thought my family had money, he said. That sounds terrible to say out loud. It sounds honest, I said. I should have known better. You were in love, I said. That's not a character flaw. He was quiet for a long time. A pair of sparrows landed in the courtyard, hopped around, left. I don't know what I'm doing with my life, he said. I had this whole picture of what it would look like by now, and none of it turned out right. The job is fine, but it doesn't mean anything. The house feels like a mistake. I look around and I think, what am I actually building? What does any of this add up to? That is the most important question you've asked in years, I said. He laughed, short and pained. High bar. I know. He looked up at the carriage house apartment, at the warm light in the windows. Do you like it here? Living above the shop like this? I'm home, I said. It took me a while to find my way back to it. He left around 5. I watched his taillights disappear down the county road, and then I went inside and heated up the last of Louise's casserole and sat at the kitchen table where Maggie's photograph was on the windowsill. And I thought about the things you can and cannot rush. 2 months passed. The secretary desk shipped to Charleston. The Windsor chairs went back to Connecticut. We took on a new contract, a private estate in Virginia, with a full dining room set that hadn't been touched properly since the 1940s. Ray drove out to assess and came back with photographs that made the craftsman gather around his tablet like it was a window into something sacred. My son called twice during those 2 months. Both times we talked for a while about nothing complicated, mostly about the weather and the work, and once about a woodworking class he'd looked up online, which he mentioned almost shyly, like he wasn't sure if I'd take it seriously. I told him I thought it was a good idea. He said he'd look into it more. My daughter-in-law called once. She had a new attorney, she said. She was serious about the business, and she knew I had resources, and she felt I wasn't giving her a fair chance. I told her I wished her well. I said I meant that genuinely. She hung up. A week later she called again. This time she didn't lead with the business. Her voice was different, pulled thin. She and Ethan were separating, she said. He'd asked her to leave. She said it like she was reading from a prepared statement, controlled and bright, but underneath it I could hear something that wasn't quite grief and wasn't quite relief. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Are you? She said. I don't take pleasure in failed marriages, I said. Whatever I thought of your choices, I never wanted your marriage to fail. Ethan told me about the workshop, she said, about what it's actually worth. I see. Why didn't you ever tell us? I told you what was true, I said. You decided what you wanted to assume. She was quiet for a moment. I think I made a lot of decisions based on wrong assumptions. That's honest, I said. I'm not sure I deserve credit for honesty right now, she said. But okay. She hung up. It was the first conversation we'd had in years that ended without her trying to get something from me. The local business journal ran a piece on us in January, a profile of Callaway Restoration, our history, our current contracts, the conservation fellowship we'd established in Maggie's name at the regional art school the previous fall. The writer got some things wrong. As they always do, they said. I'd started the business after retiring, when in fact I'd spent 26 years building it, before handing day-to-day operations to Ray. But they got the important parts right. The way Maggie and I had started with nothing. The years of learning by failing, of taking every piece that came through the door as a lesson in patience and craft. The philosophy that a thing worth saving is worth saving properly, without shortcuts. The journal put the estimated valuation of the business in the 4th paragraph. It was not a small number. My son texted me the morning the article ran. He said, "Dad, I saw the article. I didn't know about the fellowship in Mom's name. I just wanted to say that." I read it 3 times, then I called him. The fellowship was her idea, I said, when he answered, before she died. She said she wanted something to go on doing what she did, finding people who were serious about craft and giving them room to learn it properly. She would have loved seeing it, he said. She did see it, I said. I described it to her in the hospital, every detail. She made me promise to get the name exactly right. He was quiet on the line for a moment. Then he said, "Can I come see it? The workshop. I'm not trying to insinuate myself or complicate anything. I just want to see what you and Mom built. Come Saturday," I said. "I'll have Ray give you the real tour." He came Saturday. He wore clothes that were right for a workshop, work boots, old jeans which told me he'd thought about it in advance. Ray walked him through everything, every room, every piece in progress, every archived photograph and document going back to the first lease. I watched from a respectful distance and let it unfold. At the end of the tour, Ray left us in the courtyard. The winter light was pale and low, the kind that makes the brick look amber. "How long did it take to get here?" my son asked. "From the beginning. To this? 26 years, I said. Give or take the years before that when I was learning what I didn't know. You don't rush the important things. They'll get there when they're ready. I feel like I've lost 15 years, he said, just not paying attention, not asking the right questions, not being present for the people who were worth being present for. He said the last part quietly, not looking at me. "You're here now," I said. "Is that enough?" "It's a start," I said. "It's more than a start if you do something with it." He nodded. He looked at the mill building, at the bare oaks behind it, at the light. He said, "I signed up for that woodworking class. It's on Tuesday nights. The teacher is this guy in his 70s who trained in Denmark. He says if you can't fix your own mistakes, you shouldn't make things." "That's good advice," I said. "I thought so." He paused. "Dad, I want to give the house back." I shook my head. "That house is yours, Ethan. I gave it to you. I know you did. But I can't live there the right way anymore. Every room. I keep seeing, I just can't." He looked at his hands. "Brenda is moving out. The plan is she takes what's hers and I take what's mine, and we figure out the rest through lawyers. I found an apartment. It's nothing special. I'm going back to something simpler for a while. I think I need to." "That sounds like wisdom," I said. "I'm selling the car," he said. "I've been thinking about what you and Mom built, how you started. You sold your car. You took out a second mortgage on a condo you could barely afford. You did that to build something real. I've been financing appearances. A nice car, a renovated house, the right look. None of it was real. None of it was mine. It's not too late to change that," I said. "I know." He took a breath. "I was thinking this is probably presumptuous, and you can absolutely say no. And I understand if the answer is no, but I was thinking maybe there's something I could learn here. At the workshop, not on the business side, I know I haven't earned that. But maybe on the floor. Learning the actual work. Marcus said he'd teach me the basics of finishing if you approved it." He said Marcus's name carefully, like he'd made a point of learning it. "He said he started as a floor assistant, and that you gave him a real chance when nobody else took him seriously." "Marcus is the best finisher we've had in 10 years, I said. "He earned that. Nobody gave it to him." "I know," my son said. "That's kind of the point." I looked at him. 41 years old, standing in the courtyard with his hands in his pockets and his mother's eyes, asking for a chance to learn something hard from scratch with no shortcuts. I thought about what Maggie would say if she were standing here. I thought I could almost hear her saying it. "You start at the floor level," I said. "That means cleaning, moving, fetching, watching, asking questions only when the craftsman invites them. You don't touch a piece until Marcus says you're ready to touch a piece. Could be weeks, could be longer. And you show up when you're scheduled, every time. Because the work waits for no one, and neither do the people doing it." "I understand," he said. "There is one other thing," I said. He looked at me. "On Saturday mornings, before your shift, you have coffee with me. Here. No agenda. Just coffee and conversation. I want to know who you are, Ethan. Who you've been. What you think about. I've been wanting to know that for longer than I care to admit." He was quiet for a moment. Something moved across his face that I hadn't seen in a long time, maybe since he was young. Since the Saturday mornings, he used to follow me around asking questions about everything. "I'd really like that," he said. He started the following Tuesday. Not on the floor, he started by sweeping it, which Ray arranged deliberately, and which I approved of completely. There's a reason you begin with the floor. You learn where everything lives. You learn the rhythm of the space. You learn to see what the craftsmen need before they ask for it, because you're already there, and you're already paying attention. I watched from the office window on his first morning. Ray had assigned him to work alongside a woman named Dolores, who had been with us for 11 years and had exactly as much patience for shortcuts as the work itself demanded, which was none. I watched her correct his sweeping technique twice in the first hour, the specific direction, the reason for it, the way debris affects a finishing surface if it's not contained properly. My son listened. He didn't argue. He did it again the right way. That Saturday morning, he knocked on the apartment door at 8 o'clock with 2 coffees from the gas station down the road, not the specialty cafe, not something delivered, just gas station coffee in paper cups, which told me he was paying attention to the right things. We sat at the kitchen table with Maggie's photograph on the windowsill and we talked. Not about business, not about his marriage or the house or the money, about the woodworking class, which he was finding harder than he expected and more interesting than he'd anticipated, about a piece of furniture he'd noticed on the floor during his week, a Victorian writing desk with an inlay repair in progress, and a question he'd had about the inlay process that he hadn't felt ready to ask yet, about a book he'd been reading, a history of the American furniture-making tradition, which he'd found at the used bookshop in town because the apartment didn't have reliable internet yet and he'd needed something to do in the evenings. He'd bought the book because of us, he said, because he was trying to understand the context of what we'd built. Your mother would have loved knowing you were reading that, I said. I wish I could ask her questions, he said, about the early years, what it was like. Ask me, I said. I was there, so he did. He asked about the first piece we ever sold, and the first one we got wrong, and the worst mistake we'd made early on, and how we'd recovered from it. And what Maggie's role had been in the work before her health made it impossible for her to be on the floor. I told him things I hadn't spoken out loud in years. The $300 table, the law firm lobby, the year we couldn't make payroll and Maggie's sister lent us money without telling her husband because she believed in us more than the numbers did. The night we found out we'd won the first museum contract and drove to a diner at midnight because we were too wired to sleep and ate pie and talked for 3 hours about what we were actually trying to do. She said we were in the business of returning things to themselves, I said. That was how she put it. Not making them new. Returning them to what they were meant to be. My son was quiet. He was looking at the photograph on the windowsill. That's what I'm trying to do, he said finally. I think return to what I was meant to be, before I got distracted by everything else. It takes time, I said. These things don't rush. I know, he said. I'm starting to understand that. We finished the coffee. He rinsed the cups and put them by the sink, which Maggie would have noted approvingly. He put on his jacket and stood at the door. Same time next week? He said. Same time, I said. He left. I stood at the window and watched him walk across the courtyard toward his truck, stopping to look up at the mill, building the way he'd looked at it the first time, not like he was seeing a business, but like he was seeing something that had been there his whole life without him knowing it. Something that had been built slowly and honestly, and with more difficulty than he'd understood. The bare oaks threw long shadows across the yard, February light, pale and specific, the kind that shows up without ceremony and illuminates everything without flattering it. I thought about what Maggie used to say about this time of year. She said January was the month of reckoning, and February was the month of beginning. You couldn't rush from one to the other. You had to sit in the reckoning until it was finished with you. I thought she was right. I went to my desk and opened the ledger I kept by hand, not because the business needed a handwritten ledger. We had systems for all of that, but because Maggie had started one in 1996, and I'd kept it going ever since. Every major piece, every milestone, every year's closing note. The last entry in her handwriting was from the autumn before her diagnosis, a brief note about the gala and the award, and a line at the end that said, "This will outlast us. That was always the goal." I picked up my pen and wrote the date. Then I wrote, "The boy came back. He's learning to sweep. Maggie, I think we've got something to work with." I closed the ledger and put the pen down and looked at her photograph on the desk, the one from the first harvest, Not wine in this case, but a figure of speech she'd borrowed from somewhere, meaning the first real return we'd seen on everything we'd sown. She was holding a cup of terrible coffee and laughing, because some things didn't change. He's starting to ask questions, I told her. You'd be pleased. Outside, the February light was making the mill brick glow the color of old wood when the oil comes back to it. That moment in restoration when the grain opens up and the piece remembers what it is. There is no shortcut to that moment. You cannot force it or schedule it or purchase it. You prepare the surface. You apply what is needed. You give it time. And eventually, if you've done the work honestly, the thing returns to itself. That is the only way it happens. That is the only way any of it happens. I put the kettle on for tea and went back to the work.